realizing there were cardboard boxes beneath. Pulling them out and peering inside, I saw what still haunts me in my dreams to this day. What is the most horrifying thing you have come across in your time on this earth? The case of baby P. May came to mind. A 17-month-old baby, abused and murdered by his own parents, who used to smear his cheeks with chocolate spread to hide the bruises and cuts that they had inflicted upon him, as well as make it look as if he had eaten a tasty treat. While he was on a child protection register, he was still left with those parents. Those same parents who beat him so badly. Poor baby P suffered from over 40 injuries, including fractured ribs and a broken back, and he was left inside his cot until he eventually succumbed. Or what about well-known killer Ted Bundy, who kidnapped, raped, and killed dozens of young women, only confessing to 30 of his crimes after his arrest over a decade earlier, and often being described as handsome, charming, and charismatic. Maybe even Jeffrey Dahmer, well-known serial killer, cannibal, and necrophiliac. There are but a few examples of what you know, public knowledge. A quick Google search and you can read all about cases like these. But have you ever asked yourself, what about those that I don't know? Surely if these were solved and made the public, they must be the tip of the iceberg, right? In my line of work, I've come across cases and men like I've previously stated, and worse. Whether the perpetrators were human or something more nefarious, I'm here to share the tales of some of my investigations. So to start off with, my name is Theodore, but you can call me Teddy. There are two aspects in my line of work: the jobs I get paid for, such as hunting down cryptids for the government, assisting priests in exorcisms, or stopping hauntings by either banishing the force involved or laying them to rest. And as for the second aspect, it may take a bit of explaining. You see, I myself am a cryptid. In the paranormal community, individuals like myself are simply called the detached, or just detached. And since we are quite rare, you may not know of us. You see, all detached cases used to be normal humans. Our souls are in sort of a limbo between this world and beyond. In my case, this happened during a near-death experience when my soul was in purgatory. Some paranormal entity intervened, if you will, and as a result, my soul remains in purgatory, between worlds. And because of this, I'm blessed with abilities not typically found in the common man. A few of these would be the ability to see spirits, demons, and other entities. Another is enhanced regeneration. I can heal broken bones, missing limbs, cuts, and bruises in a matter of minutes to hours. And I cannot die. Not until I resign myself. Until I willingly leave this body and join my own soul in purgatory, so we can pass the threshold between worlds together. Others would be superhuman strength, resilience, and telepathic communication. Since my soul is between worlds, not entirely disconnected from me, I can go above and beyond the limitations of this plane of existence. As for the reason I'm in my line of work, rest assured there is a reason, which I'm not comfortable sharing here just yet. But I've been doing what I do for over a decade, and as long as I go along, I will be making multiple posts on this subreddit explaining my experiences. Stuff like specific cryptids, spirits, demons, and how to deal with them. And reaching out to other members of the paranormal community to compare and share experiences. Anyways, now that you're caught up, allow me to tell you my first story. This was when I just had started out doing what I do. Taking place in 2013, specific locations and names of people involved will not be announced as to retain a semblance of privacy. But here it goes. This was one of the jobs I do on my own, meaning without payment. After nursing a hangover from the previous evening and surfing the web for a couple of hours searching for unsolved homicides, cold cases, etc., I'd found one in a small backwater down nearby. The remains of a young girl dated back over 15 years had been found buried in a small clearing. They had neither a name nor specific cause of death for her, although it was speculated that she had taken a blow to the head evident by a fracture on her skull. The police had literally nothing but an idea just to how she died. Feeling satisfied that I had found my next case, I grabbed my gear bag, threw it in the back of my pickup, and headed down to the road, figuring I'd start my investigation at the small clearing in which she had been found. Upon arriving, I saw that the area was cordoned off with police tape. Since nobody was inside, I crouched under. The moment I entered the area, a cold shiver spread down my spine, assuring me that a tortured spirit was in the area. Hello? Is anybody there? My name is Theodore Colson. I'm here to help. Don't be afraid, I said in my most reassuring voice. You see, most spirits of murder victims, specifically children, tend to be skittish when approached. As you can imagine, going through your own grisly death must be quite traumatizing. It is a whole job in and of itself to earn their trust. I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A white figure hiding behind a tree. Deciding to approach slowly and non-threateningly, I placed my hands to my side and slightly raised. I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to know what happened to you, if that's okay. Getting closer now, I saw streaks of long blonde hair and a single blue eye peering at me from behind the tree. Her gown, more visible now, it was torn and dirty, streaked with blood and dirt. Following her eye, I could see her eye eyeing up my belt. Not knowing whether it was a gun, knife, or belt itself, which bothered her, I decided to slowly take it off and place it on the ground to further earn her trust. It's okay. I'm one of the good guys, I promise, I said in a light but firm tone. She began slowly walking out from behind the tree, giving me a better view of her on her condition. The police report was right. She had clearly received a hard blow to the head, a bald patch and with bits of skin and flesh missing around her left temple. Blood stained her face, hair and pieces of the torn gown below. She was a young girl, maybe 8 to 9. Pale skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and the remnants of a nightgown she clutched across her bruised and broken body. Still being pretty new to this line of work, I grimaced upon seeing her and begun to feel a bile rising up in my throat. Attempting to hold down my breakfast and compose myself, I said, "Hey, what's your name?" in a shaky voice. I suppose she could sense the way I felt in the way I spoke because of a resigned look spread across her face as she looked down at the ground. Of course, spirits take the form of the way they were left upon the death, and most either repressing their memories of the event or retain trauma from it, making my job even more difficult. I have a little girl just like you know, I said in an attempt to make her feel safe. She looked at me with a small glint of optimism in her eyes. Smiling, I said, "Yeah, she's with her mother right now. I don't know what we would do if she was wandering around in the woods alone like you are. Maybe your mother would like to know where you are," I said, hoping to find out anything of who she is or who her family may be. She then looked at me with a resigned expression across her face, as if she wanted to say something but just couldn't. She opened her mouth to reveal a missing tongue. I understood. "Well, maybe I could follow you and you could show me something. I'm not leaving you until I've helped," I said assuredly. And with that, she pointed in the direction that led deeper into the forest, then started walking towards it. Now, I usually wouldn't follow a spirit into a forest, but my heart went out to this girl. So upon retrieving my belt, I obliged. After around an hour of walking, we came upon a worn-down log cabin that looked like it hadn't been occupied in decades. The girl came to a halt, her body frozen in place as if relieving whatever I assume had taken place within this cabin. Walking up to her and crouching in front of her so that her eyes met mine, I said in the calmest voice I could muster, "It's okay. You don't have to go any further. How about I check out this cabin while you wait out here for me to be done?" She nodded enthusiastically as I got up, walking closer to the small structure, peering through the dust and grime-covered windows. It was too dark inside to make anything out. Walking around to the door, I tried to open it. I discovered it was locked. "I guess it's a good job I brought my pack along," I muttered to myself, pulling it off my shoulder and retrieving my crowbar from inside. The door opened without any struggle, and the smell of decades worth of dust spread throughout the air. Upon entering and retrieving my flashlight, I deducted this cabin was likely used seasonally for hunting evidence from the bear traps, empty ammunition boxes strewn across a table in the center of the room, the small generator outside, and the gas lanterns placed around the room which would illuminate it nicely. There was also a small area towards the back of the cabin which I assumed was for skinning and gutting animals, considering the black stains across the counter and the floor beneath, which I assumed to be blood. I decided to begin my search at the table, realizing there were cardboard boxes beneath. Pulling them out and peering inside, I saw what still haunts me in my dreams to this day. Dozens of Polaroids depicting little girls in various states, from tied up and bleeding, laying on the butcher's table with their hands tied, limbs missing, some of them with their heads shaved. All of them blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Upon this, I shrieked and threw myself backward, vomiting across the floor in the process. Whoever the sick, depraved individual who owns this cabin is, it seems as if the little girl wasn't his only victim. Taking a few minutes to regain my composure, I slowly got to my feet, took out all the boxes from under the table, placing them on the surface to see if there was any more evidence. Upon sorting throughout all the photographs, I noticed singular handwritten words on the back of each of them, written in black Sharpie. But they made no sense. Deciding I would sort through them and attempt to piece things together back home, I emptied them all into my pack. The next box contained what seemed to be an array of missing persons posters, milk cartons, printed reports, dating back as far as the 80s from multiple states. My eyes widened. I was clearly dealing with a prolific and as yet uncaught serial killer who was as of yet uncaught, preying on mostly children. This man also had a specific type of victim. All prepubescent girls with blue eyes and blonde hair, which means he had to have a motive. Emptying the contents of the second box into my pack, I began sifting through the third and final box, another sick finding laid within. It was all little girls' underwear. With a look of disgust, I searched through them to see if I could find any names embroidered onto them. And surely enough, I did. On one of them, I saw the name Shannon on the back, as well as a letter placed at the very bottom with an address and a name on it. Dear Mr. Kearney. After taking and folding the letter, I grabbed the box of underwear and some lighter fluid from the counter. Heading back outside, I placed the box down, I squirted the lighter fluid over it, and I set it alight. It was too sick of a finding to take or leave there. I then proceeded to walk back around the cabin, back to where the little girl was patiently waiting. Remembering the name I had seen written on the underwear, I walked back over to her. I decided to give it a try. Shannon? I said. Having my suspicions firm, when her eyes widened, she nodded. I think I found out who our guy is. If you want to come with me, well, we can go to my place while I go through what I found, I offered. She responded with a short nod, and so we walked back to the clearing, entered my vehicle, and headed back home. Once there, I headed straight for my study, with Shannon tailing close behind, emptying the contents of my pack onto my desk. I began sifting through the photographs and missing persons. After around 5 minutes, I looked over to see the little girl from the Polaroids, her attention fixed on one in specific. Her photograph. Hey Shannon, follow me, I said, leading her back into my living room. You want to watch some cartoons while I get to work? I said, turning on the TV. She nodded and sat down on the couch. If you need anything, come grab me. I'll leave my study door open, I said, switching the channel to cartoons, and retrieving a bottle of whiskey and a glass to take back with me to study. I would need it after all. No sane person can do this sober. Heading back to my study, I remember the words scrawled on the back of each photograph. Maybe they were each a part of a message, a sentence. So I cleared my desk and I took a swig of whiskey straight from the bottle before pouring myself a glass. I got to work, reading the words on the back of each photograph. Them, find, hid, I, remains, you'll, the, never. And within a minute, I had a clear message. You'll never find them. I hid the remains. This seemed to be a direct message to law enforcement or whoever came looking. But if that was so, why would a name and address be included in the cardboard boxes? Did he want to be caught? Was it a trap? I had all these questions swirling around my mind when I heard a knock from the door, which snapped me back to reality. Walking out into the living room, Shannon was on her feet, now looking worried. I just laughed upon the ceiling. I just laughed upon seeing the familiar face of Murph, a fellow detached and investigator like me who I had worked on a case with a few months back. It's okay, Shannon. He's one of the good guys like me, I said as I answered the door. Sorry, we don't want to buy any Girl Scout cookies, I said upon opening the door. Huh, very funny, he said, entering the house. You see, Murph is ex-military and wears his medals proudly when he's on the job with a beret. So, who's this? He said once he had closed the door, eyeing up Shannon, who was once again sat on the couch watching cartoons. My new client? Shannon? She can't talk though, so don't bother trying. Follow me, I'll show you what I'm working on, I said, leading him out into the hallway and into my study. I offered him a drink, which he accepted as I explained everything I had found thus far. This is some pretty sick stuff. So Girly in the next room is one of the victims, he said. Yep. One of around 50 or so from what I've seen, dating back decades. Who knows if this guy is still active? I say, a solemn expression spreading across my face. Which reminds me, you still got one of those buddies in the department? I need some names run. The next few hours we spent mostly sorting evidence, locations of the missing persons, and dates. We'd established that he had been targeting young blonde, blue-eyed girls across multiple states from the early 80s, each killing spaced out over by a month or two, running into a straight line across multiple states, starting with Oregon and ending with Shannon. Running in a straight line across multiple states, starting with Oregon and ending up with Shannon, who was abducted in Kansas in the early 90s. After placing the missing's poster in the order of time with their photographs accompanying them, we established that after entering Utah, his victims had begun appearing to be in the cabin I'd explored, meaning the girls abducted from the previous states were brought here to Kansas and slaughtered. The killer clearly had a strategy, since the place even Shannon was abducted from was still pretty far from here. Even if it was within the same state, nobody would come looking for these girls in a forest miles away. Maybe this was how he had avoided capture for all those years. After a long evening of establishing a timeline, a motive, and piecing together who these girls were and when they were abducted, we decided to call it a night, planning on heading to the address I'd found in the next morning. After a long and restless sleep plagued with nightmares, I was awoken by Murph shaking me. We got his name. Seamus Kearney. Wake up, Teddy, come on, he said. I sat up, rubbing my head, attempting to stave the hunger with no such luck. Oh, right. Tell me what you've got on him, I said, curious as to what he had discovered. Get this, man. The guy's record is clean. No previous arrests or infractions with the law. Only thing that stands out is he kind of went off the grid in the early 90s. No family, children, nothing. This guy's a literal nobody. This isn't really remarkable considering most avid killers tend to not want to call attention to themselves when they do what they do. Then you have that entirely different variety, the ones who hide in plain sight. Pillars of the community. And what about the address we've got? I said. He still owns it. And as far as we can tell, he still lives there. Come on, get up. I'll drive, Murphy said with his usual sense of enthusiasm. After getting up, I grabbed my bag and began heading out to Murph's car, Shannon trailing close behind us. We decided to pick up breakfast at a diner along the way. It gave us some time to think about our strategy. Provided he was there, and this wasn't a trap, we needed to find a way to lay Shannon and all her fellow victims to rest. I know what you may be thinking, but we couldn't arrest him. That isn't the way things work. Justice in death and unfinished business either counts on these girls' remains being found, identified, and their families knowing what had happened to them. A sincere apology from their killer followed with his own death, or simply their killer suffering from just as they did followed with death. A few of these are unethical, though. And since Seamus had dozens, if not hundreds, of victims, the first would be impossible. That leaves either an apology or his own death, or simply torturing him until he succumbs. Considering we're not crazy as he is, the last one is out, leaving us with the apology, then killing him. As for what happens to a killer once they die, or what happens to the spirits if not laid to rest, the killer doesn't come back with unfinished business. Black figures we call Mories appear and drag their spirits off. As for what happens afterward, we do not know. But I can't imagine it would be anything nice. As for the victims, if they are not laid to death over a certain amount of time, their souls begin to degrade. Not meant to be left in this world for so long without a body, they forget all of who they once were, all of who they are, but are left with the one thing in their minds: vengeance, pain, suffering, anger, and confusion. When this happens, the only solution is to banish them. Since in this state they can actually harm the living, and will do without discrimination, we call these beings shrieks. Since, well, that's what they do. They wander around our world screaming, hunting. This is what makes my job so important. Without people like me and Murph, this world would be overrun with such creatures. Anyways, back to the story. Me, Murph, and Shannon continued driving along, entering the town in which this house was located. Anticipation and anxiety beginning to spread between the three of us. Upon arriving outside the address, we were met with a large but disheveled-looking house, looking like something straight out of the Addams Family. "We know what we're doing." "Yeah," said Murph. "We'll simply knock first. Make sure to hide your gun, but keep it accessible. And no military talk. We don't want this guy thinking we're narcs. And if he refuses to open up, we break the locks and forcibly enter. You brought the photographs, right?" I said with as serious as a look I could muster. "Yeah, I got 'em," said Murph. "Good. We're gonna get this sick man to confess. Then I'd put a bullet right between his eyes," I say with a hint of malice in my voice. We reached the doorway, knocking on the large oak door and waiting in anticipation for an answer. It must have been like 4 minutes until we saw the curtains over by the living room part. One sickly, bloodshot-looking eye stared back at us. "Crap," muttered Murph, who had been readjusting his holster at the time. "Crap, indeed," I say as we share a look, knowing exactly what we have to do now. I kick the door as hard as I can. The hinges split and it falls onto the floor. We were met with a putrid amalgamation of cigarettes, weed, alcohol, and some sickly sweet smell we both instantly recognized. Unholstering our weapons, we made a straight beeline into the room and we had seen Seamus in, only to be met with the shotgun pointed right at us. Jumping onto the floor and opening fire, I took his trigger finger off with a single shot, but I was too late. The blast of the shotgun ringing in my ears, I looked over and saw Murph clutching his chest. "Crap!" he yelled out. "Oh, that hurt, you prick!" he yelled in the direction of Seamus. That was when we got a good look at him. Laying on the floor, clutching his hand with blood trickling down, was the disheveled form of a man. A shell of a human being, wallowing in the filth of his living room, with widened, bloodshot eyes, filthy silver hair, and unkempt beard spread across his cheeks, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been changed in years. What the hell are you?" he slurred, clearly drunk. Getting up, I kicked Seamus's gun away from him, grabbing the photos from Murph's pack. You recognize these, you sick freak? I said, do you? Speak, I said in the most aggressive voice I could, but I was only met with a look of utter shock and despair in his voice. No! I swear to God, who are you? He cried out. I'm sure you don't, I said, heading back out into the room. Keep an eye on him, I said to Murph. He nods to me as I head out to retrieve Shannon. Bringing her in the room with me, a look of fear spreads across her face and she jumps back. A small scream leaving her lips as she's met with the killer. This confirms all of my suspicions, and I know exactly how I'm going to get his heartfelt apology. I look back at Seamus laying on the floor with a confused and terrified look on his face. Apologize right now, and we'll go easy on you, I say. Apologize for what? I swear you guys having the wrong guy, he utters. I say, heading out into the hallway and down to the basement stairs. Upon descending them, the putrid aroma grows stronger. I grab my flashlight and click it. As I met with the corpses of over a dozen children in different states of decomposition and dismemberment. I see their spirits standing around the room. Some of them staring directly at me, all of them with that same look of despair. As I bend over and puke my breakfast up across the stairs, a couple of the children approach me, retaining the same injuries their corpses had. All of them blue-eyed, blonde-haired little girls. After regaining as much composure as I could, I noticed I'd begun to cry. Who are you, mister? Uttered one of the children. I'm one of the good guys, I said in a teary tone. We're laying you guys to rest. Please follow me if you can. I say as half of the group follow me up the stairs. As I enter the living room once again followed by the children, I look Seamus in his eyes. He knew I had seen his little slaughter room downstairs. I'm sick, man. Please take me in. You guys are cops, right? Come on, just take me in, buddy. I need help, he says in desperation. I simply shake my head in refusal. Not even blinking, I walk over to him, placing my hands at his temple as his eyes roll back into his skull. I see everything. All of his past, all of what he's done. I hated doing this. Peering into the minds of sick individuals such as him. I suddenly knew his motive. I knew why he'd done what he did. I almost felt myself feeling sorry for the man, but I had caught myself. As a child, Seamus had a 13-year-old babysitter named Maya. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. When his parents went out on a date, she would take him to his bedroom, undress them both, and you can guess what happened after this. Seamus, upon reaching the age of 10, when alone with her in his bedroom, tried to refuse what she was doing to him. Her getting forceful and beginning to hurt him, and as a response, he hit her over the head with a toy. He managed to grab from the floor, and he didn't stop. He just didn't stop until her brains were paste. He killed her. Coming from a rich family, Seamus's parents covered it up. But evidently his trauma grew to become an obsession. This is why he had done what he did. The telepathic ability us detached are blessed with allows us to allow others to tap into our abilities. I used this feature to bless Seamus with the sight so he could see his victims gathered around him in an attempt to receive his heartfelt apology. Upon seeing them, his eyes widened. He screamed and crawled into the floor as his victims began approaching him. He started pleading, screaming for help, but not apologizing. His victim simply stared at him. Seamus jumped across the floor, retrieving his shotgun, and before we could stop him, blew his own brains out all across the wall behind him. Me and Murph looked at each other with shock, believing our efforts to be in vain. There was no way to receive an apology from Seamus now. Meaning these girls were stuck here until we could identify who they were and tell any family they may have. But then he appeared. Seamus's ghost, half of his face missing. He looked at us as if to say, "What the hell?" And then we heard it. The nearing moan of the Mories coming to claim Seamus. They rised up from the ground, moaning, and these specters of pitch blackness grabbing Seamus by his arms and legs as he tried to fight them off, screaming as best he could with half of his face missing. Seamus was dragged back underground, and with that, he was gone. Left to his fate at the hands of the Mories. Thinking it was over, me and Morph began preparing to search the house when a doorway opened. A doorway of pure light. As it turns out, allowing Seamus to see the girls had constituted as torture, and him committing suicide had sealed his fate. The girls began walking around and through the doorway, all of them now wearing white dresses. Their injuries now healed. All of them entered except for Shannon, who just looked at me with a smile. Having her injuries restored, she can now talk. "Thank you, Teddy," she said to me, waving at me and Murph before stepping through the doorway herself. Oh, we need to get a drink, man, I heard Murph mutter to me. "Yeah, man, let's go," I said, as we left the building. And there you have it, the conclusion of this first story you'll be seeing of mine. As my first serial killer I had encountered. The ironic thing is that despite the fact I hunt cryptids for a living, Seamus was the first real monster I had ever met. And the worst of them too. Sometimes humans can be more monsters than monsters are themselves. Cryptids mostly hunt for food or based on instinct. Seamus had done it out of pure malice. Excluding his babysitter, he never needed to kill. Yet he had because he wanted to. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in my time. Been in a lot of messed up situations, but nothing haunts me quite like that basement. There are those photographs I'd found and all that stuff. Those poor little girls, man. Anyways, I now have a cryptid hunt to attend to. Gotta keep food on the table and some malt liquor in my stomach, right? I'll be posting about this next job as soon as I'm done, as well as another job I've worked on in my past. So, until next time, my friends.